With the holiday season among us, these two phones could definitely be great gift ideas because they are probably the best phones you can get for such a low cost. Hello everybody, I'm Crystal and this is the OnePlus X versus the Nexus 5X. First, let's talk about the price of these phones because that's what makes them so special. The Nexus 5X starts at $379 for the 16GB variant and $429 for the 32GB version. And that's a great price, but the OnePlus X beats the Nexus 5X by a huge margin at its $249 price point, although you're stuck to the 16GB version. And yeah, that's pretty low, but it's even more shocking once we jump into the specs. The Nexus 5X does cost 52% more, but you do get some nice extra additions, so keep these prices in mind during this review. With design, we're talking plastic versus glass. Now you would think the cheaper OnePlus X would be built from plastic, while the $130 more Nexus 5X would be built from the premium feeling glass, but no, this is not the case, and this is why we're all shocked at the OnePlus X's price point. This phone does not feel cheap at all. Its build feels fantastic and very premium with its glass backing and metal frame, and that metal frame has some micro cuts that help give it a nice grippy texture, and it isn't too bad to look at either. When looking at the front, it appears that there are no side bezels at all, which makes this phone's design even more beautiful. However, it's a bit of an illusion as you'll see when the screen turns on. Still though, this phone looks and feels very premium, much more than the more expensive Nexus 5X. The Nexus 5X still manages to look very sleek with this Nexus logo running along its back. And yeah, when picking up the phone due to its plastic build, it may feel cheap compared to the OnePlus X, but there shouldn't be any build quality worries. LG, the designers of the Nexus 5X, did a great job making the phone feel very high quality given its plastic build. However, the OnePlus X still has some more nice design elements over the Nexus 5X, like its thinness. It's a full millimeter thinner. Although with the plastic found on the 5X, the OnePlus X is a little heavier, just by a hair, at an extra 2 grams. Of course, this is unnoticeable, but these are two of the lightest phones on the market right now. You'll find the headphone jack on the bottom of the 5X, while on the OnePlus X it's at the top, but this comes down to personal preference. Volume and power buttons are found on the right, and there's no question once again that the OnePlus X's buttons are superior due to their metal build, with its even smaller microcuts to give both the power and volume buttons a nice texture. On the Nexus 5X, they're more of plastic rectangles that don't feel the greatest and also don't sport any textured patterns, so it can be a little hard to differentiate between the buttons. Charging ports are found on the bottom, although while OnePlus decided to revert back to the micro USB, the Nexus 5X features a new USB Type-C port, which we really prefer, and we'll get to more of that later. Overall, both phones feel great and impress us in their own ways, but make no mistake, the OnePlus X is a much more enjoyable phone to feel in the hand. Both phones offer decently sized screens at 5 inches on the OnePlus X and a larger 5.2-inch screen on the Nexus 5X. And although this makes this phone a little bigger all around, they both are the perfect size for one-handed use. In terms of quality, the OnePlus X's display will most likely be the one you prefer. They're both full HD, but while the Nexus 5X is your standard LCD, the OnePlus X sports an AMOLED panel. So immediately you'll notice very deep and true blacks where the pixels don't even light up under the black portions of the image that the phone is displaying. And by default, the OnePlus X is set to system-wide dark mode. So menus like settings and even the app drawer are true black, making the words and apps pop, which creates a more immersive experience. And like I said before, although OnePlus does quite trick you with its no side bezel illusion, with a system-wide dark mode and a black home screen, it really does look like a bezel-less phone. The 5X still has a nice screen, although that backlight is definitely noticeable when trying to display black images. And there's more of a ghosting type effect noticeable on the Nexus 5X as well when triggering fast animations. When comparing the two, colors seem much more natural and, well, colorful on the OnePlus X. Whites seem more realistic as well, with the 5X whites appearing a little greenish. Really, when setting these two phones side by side, the whole display of the 5X appears as if it's sitting underneath a haze. There is one thing that the 5X has going for it though, and that's its brightness. If you're somebody who's outside a lot, the 5X will definitely give you less frustration, but indoors, the OnePlus X offers a more immersive viewing experience. And although the 5X offers a larger display, most of the time you're going to have your navigation buttons on the bottom. Sure, that's like almost every Android phone, but with the OnePlus X, you can choose to have no on-screen navigation buttons and instead use these capacitive buttons found on the bottom. These buttons help actually make the phone's display feel bigger than the 5X. So that's definitely something to consider too. So far, the Nexus 5X seems to be having a hard time catching up to the OnePlus X, but this all starts to change when it comes to hardware. Inside, we have a faster Qualcomm Snapdragon 808 processor on the Nexus 5X that could also be found in a lot of flagships this year, while the OnePlus X sticks to the 801. Now, the OnePlus X does have an extra gig of RAM over the 2 gigs found on the 5X, and although it only comes in 16 gigs of storage, you do have access to a microSD card slot, where on the Nexus 5X, if you want more storage, you'll have to pay extra for the 32 gig, and you'll be stuck at that. But of course, the Nexus 5X has one huge trick up its sleeve, and that's its fingerprint scanner. It's located right on the back below the camera, and really is a great placement. This scanner is very fast too, and very reliable. It's a great feature to have, and unfortunately, OnePlus did not include their fingerprint scanner on their X model. Now, one hardware feature that is missing on the OnePlus X but found on the Nexus 5X is a front-facing speaker. It's located on the bottom front, while the OnePlus X's is located on the bottom left next to the charging port. Now, usually we'd say that a front-facing speaker is better than any speaker located on the bottom or the back. But in this case, I actually prefer the OnePlus X's speaker even when facing away from me towards the ground. You can put the volume up on the OnePlus X's speaker about 75% before it starts clipping and about 95% on the 5X, and still the OnePlus X's speaker is louder even without it facing the viewer. The 5X seems a little more muffled as well compared to the OnePlus X's more emphasized treble. Both speakers are not the greatest, and both will do the job if you're not listening to music. Both phones do include LED notification lights to help seeing if you're all caught up at a glance. Also, the little priority mode slider makes a return on the OnePlus X, allowing an instant and easy way to silence your phone. It's a really great button to have, and it saves a bit of time. Battery life on both devices are pretty good, but with the 5X's extra bump in thickness, LG was able to cram a 2,700 mAh battery into it, while OnePlus chose to have a smaller 2,525 mAh battery to keep its nice thin design. And the difference is exactly what you would expect. With an average of 3 hours of screen on time with the OnePlus X, for me that's very good. I have all my accounts on sync and really take a lot of Snapchats and pictures all day long, so I was very happy with it. But you do manage to get a little more juice out of the Nexus 5X, averaging about 3.5 hours of screen on time. There is one thing though when it comes to the OnePlus X, and that's mostly for users in the United States. The phone doesn't have some mobile data bands, and that could affect users on AT&T as well as T-Mobile, where you won't be able to get an LTE signal and instead will be stuck with 3G. The best thing about owning a Nexus phone is that you're going to be the first to get updates when Google releases them, which is why the Nexus 5X is running Android Marshmallow 6.0 right out of the box, while the OnePlus X is running Android Lollipop 5.1.1. Another great advantage is that on a Nexus phone like the 5X, you'll always be running stock Android. With the software being bloatware-free, simple, and controlled directly by Google, stock Android creates a simple and worry-free experience. And with OnePlus's Oxygen OS UI running on the OnePlus X, updates will roll out much slower, but other than that, you can expect a very similar stock Android experience. Not much has changed, menus and notification panels have not been touched aesthetically, and overall, Oxygen OS runs much like stock Android, but with a lot of very useful features. Like I said earlier, you can turn on a system-wide dark mode, which turns things like settings, the app drawer, and the notification pull-down a darker shade. On the 5X, you'll be stuck to your standard white menus. Gestures are available too, like double tap to wake and draw certain letters to open up apps and more. These can all be very useful and unfortunately are not found on the 5X. But with this being non-stock Android, companies like OnePlus can partner up with app developers to pre-install apps on the phone. And yeah, there's a lot here on the OnePlus X. It comes with a very outdated looking Google search on the home screen, along with the battery saver turned on to fill your notification jar and some other speed boosters and spam cleaners, which is quite unfortunate. However, you can disable them, of course. With the battle between 808 and 801 Qualcomm Snapdragon processors and 2 gigs of RAM versus 3 gigs, I came to a very simple conclusion. The OnePlus X is consistently okay. No horrible crashes ever, but it definitely doesn't fly, while the Nexus 5X is consistently great with rare instances of apps crashing or the phone freezing. On the OnePlus X, animations will consistently be a little choppy. Not too much, but they are definitely noticeable like when you're flying to recent app screens. On more graphic intensive games, the frame rates really suffer and this makes for a very poor gaming experience. Loading times will be a lot slower though when compared to the Nexus 5X, which performs exceptionally well. Gaming on the 5X is really good. Maybe a frame will drop here and there, but for the most part, games run buttery smooth and you should have no problems with it. Like I said, the Nexus 5X is consistently smooth all around. You don't notice any choppiness in animations that you would find on the OnePlus X, but you will run into big performance issues sometimes. It's very rare, mostly having to do with the camera app. It'll just crash sometimes, and other apps may pause for a while until they finally launch. Yeah, the majority of the time you won't run into these problems, but most likely you'll run into one of these bugs sometime down the road, where in our few weeks of testing the OnePlus X, we've had no big problems like this. There is some silver lining with the 5X issues though, and that of course has to do with it being a Nexus. When Google has a fix to these problems, you'll have them fixed immediately. Usually when it comes to phones this cheap, you're not going to get much when it comes to the cameras, but the shooters on these phones are actually very good. However, we have a very clear winner. Now, although the 13 megapixel sensor on the OnePlus is larger than the 5X's 12.3 megapixel, the actual pixel size that the 5X sensor creates is much larger, similar to a pixel size that you find in some real point-and-shoot cameras. So in the end, you can expect much more detail with the 5X. The 5X has laser autofocus, where the OnePlus does not, and unfortunately, neither of these phones have optical image stabilization. So let's hop right into these pictures, just taken out of the pocket and immediately snapping a picture. The OnePlus X tends to have a softer image, while the Nexus 5X seems to be a little sharper, which in some scenarios could be good or bad. It's up to your preference, but in some outdoor shots, I do like the OnePlus's shot a little more, mostly due to the coloring, and it's a lot more saturated on the OnePlus, and although maybe not as color accurate as the 5X, I do think it tends to have the preferable picture. Now both phones do have a habit of overexposing, but that's what HDR is for, right? Well, you would think so, but the HDR on the OnePlus almost does nothing. Take a look at the sky with HDR off and HDR on, it's still really blown out. But on the 5X, we have something called HDR+. So yeah, it acts as normal HDR, taking two different exposures and merging them into one photo, but it also gives a lot of image processing depending on the photo. We can definitely see the sky after we turn on HDR+, and really you're never going to have any under or overexposing with HDR+ on. And even though the colors are nice on the OnePlus X, I'm sure most would prefer a better exposed photo over a more saturated, overexposed photo. In low light, HDR on the OnePlus suddenly wakes up and really gets a lot more light into the picture, where on the 5X, you don't need HDR+ to get a bright picture, but it definitely doesn't hurt to turn it on to get a bit more color and make it even brighter. Really, the HDR+ found on the 5X really helps a ton, and in low light really pulls ahead of the OnePlus X. When it comes to video, both phones create some pretty shaky video without any sort of optical image stabilization, but things are much clearer and sharper on the 5X, whereas on the OnePlus, we have more of a smooth rendering of objects, which isn't very flattering. Some more features the 5X has going for it is its ability to shoot in 4K and slow-mo at 120 frames per second, two features that cannot be found on the OnePlus X. When it comes to the front-facing cameras, once again, the OnePlus offers a higher megapixel count at 8 megapixels over the 5 megapixel found on the 5X. Although, just like the rear-facing camera, you're going to have a much better time using the selfie cam on the 5X. Even without its HDR+ mode, the 5X is a lot more detailed than the OnePlus. Pictures are a lot clearer, colors are better, and expose a little bit better, but then you crank on that HDR+, and the 5X is a clear winner. There is a beauty mode on the OnePlus's selfie cam, but most people won't even bother to use this, and the quality without it is still very soft, which gets rid of the details like blemishes already. Overall, you're going to have a much better time snapping away and showing your friends your photos taken on the 5X rather than on the OnePlus X. Now really, both phones are fantastic phones, and really shocked all of us when it comes to price for the quality. Although when first picking up these phones, it's tempting to say the OnePlus X has a better value. It's $130 cheaper, yet feels $130 more expensive with this beautiful glass back that sits between its metal gold frame, along with this very nice AMOLED panel with great colors. But once you start doing work on the phone, you start to see that it's a $249 value. For a lot of people, a better camera, better battery, better gaming, and better software experience is much more important than a premium design. But not everybody. Of course, for me, I love an amazing camera, fast updates, and a bigger battery, so I would spend the extra bucks on the Nexus 5X. But if you appreciate a more luxurious looking device, and you're a big movie watcher who doesn't game, or you can get by with a decent camera, you're gonna love the OnePlus X. And of course, you can't regret what you get for that price. If you actually get sent an invite, of course. Well, that's about it for this comparison video. Thank you for watching, and if you happen to enjoy it, leave a like. Also, comment below and let me know which of these phones you prefer. And don't forget to check out these other cool videos on the side here. Also, if you're interested in our Android Authority app, click right up there on the Google Play link. And last but not least, head on over to AndroidAuthority.com as we are your source for all things Android.